Brian O'Driscoll on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
Yeah, so special treat for a Thursday evening. Brian O'Driscoll is with us in studio. How are you?
Really good, thank you.
So we'll get into previewing the two Heineken Champions Cup semi-finals in a moment, but there's obviously a couple of other big stories to touch on today. Israel Folau. The latest since yesterday is that he's notified Rugby Australia that he intends to contest this high-level code of conduct breach notice. Rugby Australia say they want that to take place as soon as possible. Whatever happens out of that, it does seem from all the comments that have been coming from Michael Cheika from Rugby Australia that Israel Folau's career with the Wallabies is over.
You'd have to imagine so. It'd be a long way back for Australian rugby, or Rugby Australia, whatever they refer to themselves as. They were adamant in their statements that it was unacceptable behaviour, which it was. He'd been warned, he'd had it written into his newly signed contract that there was going to be no similar references as we saw almost a year ago. So I don't see how there's any way back, but this one will play out.
Yeah, the legality of what Israel Folau said isn't straightforward, as much as the comments are pretty abhorrent to most of us. They are his genuinely held religious beliefs, and Rugby Australia chief Eileen Castle said this is not a religious discussion, this is a discussion around the employee-employer relationship and the values and contractual arrangements within that agreement. That's the basis on which we've served him a breach of notice. And the key point there is that he just signed a new contract worth a huge amount of money within the last few months, and as Rugby Australia have briefed, minutes were kept of the contractual negotiations where this was outlined to Israel Folau again and again and again, that he cannot make these type of comments on social media. Of
course they're keeping it legal because it's on legal grounds that the contract has been torn up. Irrespective of what your opinion is, if you and I don't know the legalities of it, but you would imagine in any employer contract or employment contract that if rugby, be it in the business world, be it as an accountant, it doesn't matter, that if you make references to homosexuals in a negative connotation, it has to be grounds for disruptive behaviour and certainly to be called into question as to whether employment should remain. The fact that this happened a second time, having had all of that discussion and, as we said, a new contract drawn up, for me, it's a closed case.
Yeah. So the legality of what's right and what's wrong may not be straightforward, but the way people respond can be actually quite straightforward. And Michael Cheika was out quickly, which may have actually made things slightly more difficult from a legal point of view, but he came out very quickly saying he wouldn't be selecting Israel Folau. When you play in the gold jersey, we represent everyone in Australia, everyone that's out there supporting us. We don't pick and choose. Saying that, quite simply, that's just the right thing to do for Michael Cheika.
It is, but Michael Cheika is a man of principle as well. You look at his origin. He comes from a Lebanese background, so he's certainly one of those multitude of diverse cultures that have immersed themselves and found themselves in Australia. And I think there's been a big onus within Australia and within this Wallabies team to embrace those different cultures, about explaining their backstory. You look at Will Guinea from Papua New Guinea, you look at how many Fijian boys have come across. So they're, not many of them would say they're purely Australian. A lot of them would say they ancestrally come from elsewhere, and they do. And so, but yet they unite as Wallabies and as Australians. So it doesn't surprise me that Cheika has come out strong that way, because it's I suppose big leadership is very, very important at times like this, and it's a difficult one for him because it's his best player. He doesn't want to lose his best player for a Rugby World Cup, but you've got to stand on high ground in really important issues.
And part of the difficulty is what you touched on there, that so many of these Australian players come from different backgrounds, and several would share religious beliefs with Israel Folau, would not make these type of comments, certainly not publicly. Is there a potential issue for Michael Cheika within the dressing room now?
Yeah, of course, I'm sure there is. But was there not an issue beforehand with Israel Folau and David Pocock having such opposing issues on the same matter? So, I watched closely after the comments last year when Israel Folau, the next game they played, and Israel Folau scored a try, and David Pocock came up and embraced him, and it, all seemed to be okay, but they clearly hold very different views. So I don't know, again, similarly to how this case between Rugby Australia and Folau is going to play out, I suppose we won't know until the next time the Wallabies get together, or you won't hear until maybe the months afterwards whether there was a divided dressing room on the back of this decision.
You mentioned he's comfortably their most important player. How big a blow is this, just in purely rugby terms, for Michael Cheika for Australia 6 months out from a World Cup?
Yeah, it's a huge blow. He's a game breaker, and he's shown it time and time again that he can do some magical stuff. A guy that's able to play three codes says it all. The fact that he excelled at rugby league, was very proficient AFL player, and then seamlessly jumped across and started playing rugby union, and was a real standout performer on the world stage. So you want, and Australia are in a position at the moment that they need their best players. They're going through a real lull by their standards. But yet, you look at what Michael Cheika managed to do in an 18-month period back in 2014 into 2015, getting them to a World Cup final. I know the person that he is, he'll see this as a challenge and he'll take it head on, and he'll almost relish it. If he does lose his best player, it'll be another obstacle to hurdle to get to the pinnacle or to the summit.
Of course, it's moved on to the Northern Hemisphere as well, this controversy, because Billy Vunipola weighed in. He wrote that there just comes a point when you insult what I grew up believing in, that you just say enough is enough. Man was made for woman to procreate. That was the goal. No. So he made those comments. Saracens aren't going to suspend him. They've warned him about his behaviour, saying he made a serious error of judgment. He is going to play, it seems, against Munster this weekend. This was, I guess, in a way, the first time Billy Vunipola had made comments like this publicly. Was it the right reaction from Saracens? Yeah,
I think it was. I think they had to take a hard stand, and the RFU are allegedly going to have a hearing as well. It's a fine line between free speech and having your comments as being perceived as dangerous, and that's what they are, to be honest with you. If you are segregating one group of individuals, and some people will know, very vulnerable young kids that aren't sure about their sexuality, and that's what we're talking about ultimately. Whatever about liars and adulterers and everything else, I think it's the homosexual aspect is the issue. And you think about the dangerousness of those comments within a sporting context. There simply aren't compared to society, there are not the same category of gay sports people as there are in society. That is the reality, because they're afraid to come out. And these sort of comments are certainly not going to help young kids questioning their sexuality or uncertain of their sexuality and wanting to have that freedom to come out into a society that will accept them. When you have big name internationals like this, like Israel Folau, like Billy Vunipola, talking negatively about it, it's only going to make their situation exacerbate itself and create more stress for those individuals. So I think we can't condone that in any shape or form, and as a result, I think Rugby Australia have responded well. Sorry, seen a slap on the wrist, but
is that enough then? Because obviously, when it comes to sport and high-level sport, the lines get blurred very easily when it comes to ethics and morals. That Billy Vunipola is a player of such stature, of such influence, that when he makes comments like that unfortunately, because you're such an influential person, that actually maybe the punishment needs to be harsher than if somebody else does.
They are awful. They're awful comments too, as far as I'm concerned. And some people will agree with me, and some people will disagree. It doesn't match up with the values of the game of rugby. We're an inclusive game. It's a game for everyone. And when I talk about a game for everyone, it's the smallest individual to the largest individual, and everybody in between. And every creed, every religion, it doesn't matter your sexuality. This is a game for everyone, and they're values that we've preached for a long time. And when someone counters that, I think they bring into question the morals of what our game is, and they question us. And as a result, I think there has to be a strong stand against those individuals and those players. And I think Billy Vunipola is very, very lucky just to get a slap on the wrist.
And that dressing room culture, and have you ever found yourself in a situation where you've been embarrassed by antics of teammates, by things teammates have said that you felt it reflects on us as a group as a whole? Because that in many ways is unfair to look at Saracens as an organisation. Billy Vunipola is more than able to hold his own and should be held accountable for these comments, but it does end up reflecting on the greater group.
Yeah, it does. I think it sometimes takes the braver person in a dressing room when they don't like something that's been said to call someone out on it. I think it's less acceptable these days than even 5 years ago when I played, where you might have remained silent where you heard a derogatory comment of some sort. I think it would be less acceptable these days, or you would see less silence. People would challenge one another, and it's the environment and the way the world has gone that we're a way more open environment, and finally we're going in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. Towards accepting people of all kinds.
I want to talk about Rory Best because he's confirmed today that he is going to retire from all rugby after the World Cup. He turns 37 in August, obviously got a pretty nasty looking injury in the Champions Cup quarter-final against Leinster. His career and what he's achieved, winning 2 Grand Slams, like he's right up there when we talk about great players. We maybe don't appreciate the big hookers as much as we do with the fancy back players.
Yeah, listen, Rory Best has been enormous for Ireland and for Ulster over the course of the last 15 years. Was it 2006, around 2006 that he got his first cap? Very popular guy within the squad. Went about his business. He played second fiddle to Jerry Flannery for a number of years, and then broke in as first choice, and he's owned that position since that time really. And now he's become this phenomenal captain as well and leader within the Irish setup. He's definitely past his best, but yet at different times throughout this season he's shown some of that old quality that we've enjoyed for the last decade. So he will be. Sometimes you're not fully appreciated until you're gone, and he will definitely will feel his absence from November on.
Was it clear from very early? Was it clear from early on when he arrived into the Irish squad that he had those leadership qualities?
No, he just went about his business. I think he was quite a quiet fella, but very likeable. But within a few seasons, he certainly wasn't afraid to speak his mind. But he definitely chose his moments, and even when I was captain, or when when Paulie was captain towards the end, or Jamie Heaslip, Rory was always willing to offer another voice and take some of the pressure off those other leaders. So it just looks as though he's completely evolved into a terrific leader. I think his on-field stuff is brilliant. He says all the right things off it.
It's hard to think of too many players who are as good at managing a referee as Rory Best.
He's exceptional. He's really exceptional at it, and it's something that I envy, that I would have liked to have been able to add to my game. I was
what
a bit hot
is it?
cold.
Is it just his tone?
It's just temperament. It's a great temperament that, as upset as he gets, it's palatable for a referee. Whereas some of us absolutely flew off the handle and antagonised referees, and there's no doubt you start off badly with a referee as a captain, it's very hard to win them back. So as bad as it gets for him, it's really a shake of the head, and then he just gets on with it and parks it and moves forward. So his captaincy, I have to say, I've watched admiringly from the sidelines as to how well he's dealt with it over the last 3 or 4 seasons.
Presuming he does get back to full fitness, starts at the World Cup?
Yeah, I think he does. I think he starts for a couple of reasons. I think he starts because he's a real leader, but I also think he starts because there's no other player that has really stood up to the plate in the last year, when perhaps it's a position within the Irish setup that we could have called, we could have done with a bit of competition, and where guys have been given their opportunity, they haven't taken it. So ultimately, he's never disappointed, Rory. He's had his moments this season. He hasn't had great games like all 36-year-olds, but ultimately he's our number one hooker. irrespective of whether he's captain or not.
Yeah, it's a bit insane to be playing in such a physical position at such a high level still at 36.
I look at some of the games and I just think about how he's going to get out of bed the next day.
How Monday morning must go.
How it really must feel. Like, literally, I wouldn't say he's sat up in bed for the last 3 or 4 seasons. I say it's a roll out and then sit on the side of the bed. Because of he doesn't ever mind himself, because he still goes in for all those jackal steals, looking for turnovers, because he still carries, because he still gets through an impressive tackle count. He never shirks any of the responsibilities of offering it to some younger player. It's he always takes it head on, and as a result, I'm sure he must have one eye on November and just trying to get there. But the big prize of a World Cup from now to then will get you through it.
Yeah, no doubt. So let's look ahead to this weekend. Where do you want to start? Which are you most excited about? Saracens, Munster, Leinster, Toulouse?
I think they're both absolutely mouth-watering games. I felt initially, at the start of this week, that the Leinster-Toulouse had the potential to be the more exciting game, but I'm not so sure now. Looking and reading a lot of articles this week and looking at Munster's stats in Heineken or European semi-finals, they'll be massively disappointed. Lost the last 6. Which is a stat that will really hurt them.
And the last couple without ever really landing
firing a shot. And I just think that they're going to be so up for it. I do think the Saracens are the team to beat in the tournament. If they get Vunipola back this week, which is there's a few question marks around it. Owen Farrell will be back. Remember, he wasn't involved in the quarter-final demolition of Glasgow because of the birth of his first child. So I just think that is a mouth-watering prospect, because Munster are going to be at their dogged best, and whether they'll be able to contain the firepower that Sarries have or not, I'm not sure. But
is their dogged best enough against Saracens? Because part of it looks at Munster and some of the performances, their biggest performances in the Champions Cup this season, they haven't played particularly well for an hour, but they've stuck in there, and then Keith Earls pops up with something special. Can you stick in there for an hour against Saracens?
But I think that's been their problem in the semi-finals over the last couple of seasons, is that the gulf between quarter-final and semi-final, they've been put away. But I think they're an improved side. Certainly, they were an improved side against Racing from the one against Saracens the previous season. I do think they'll be better for those experiences, but they're still going to have to produce their very best. And the firepower versus firepower, you back Saracens all day. But something about Munster in Europe, and if they can hang in there and stay with Saracens, it's important not to concede early, because that juggernaut comes at you, and that defensive wave is just it's impossible to play against. So they've got to start the game well in the first 10 or 15 minutes, and there's all sorts of stats in the Irish Times this week about when they score first, how often they win semi-finals. I wouldn't worry about any of that. They must begin the game well, because Sarries, when they build their lead, like the Munster team of old, when they build with 3-6-9 and score a try, the game is over all of a sudden because of that impenetrable defence. So I think it'll be a relatively low-scoring game. I get the sense that defences will really be on top, but it'll be a proper dogfight.
Where is the weakness then in Saracens? Can you get it Owen Farrell? Do you look at the Scotland game in the Six Nations and think we can get it Owen Farrell? He's just coming back from injury. Isolating Owen Farrell as a weakness seems a bit bizarre, but is there any other weaknesses there?
I think teams do look at Owen Farrell because he looks for big shots, and he's a very good defender, but he does look to make the big impact, which you wouldn't expect in most tens. But I think he thrives in that role, and he wants to be different from your average 10. So I do think you try and isolate him, and you do try and pull him out of the defensive line, and get him charging up. He does like huge line speed himself, and that's a lot of 10s like big line speed because they don't want to drift out onto the number 12. They try and push up on their own number. He does it because he wants to put massive pressure on the opposite, and it doesn't matter who is up against him. It could be the biggest, it could be CJ Stander, but he will try and lead the line. He leads the line a huge amount on kick chase as well. He's one of the few 10s in World Rugby that chases his own kicks. Boots long, and you can be sure it's almost like he gets excited, with kick chase. And it's a time for people to switch off. For him, he dials it up,
right,
and he gets after it. And I think that pressure that he can squeeze with Brad Barrett as well, who again, the talk is that he's going to play this weekend. Those two in tandem, and you bring a third party into that, and all of a sudden you've got great kick pressure. So that'll be something that he'll definitely bring to this semi-final. They know how to get it done. They've won the tournament twice in recent times, and it's over in the UK. They're playing well. I just fancy they have the edge, but it'll be a great game.
Tyler Bleyendaal obviously had a difficult day a couple of years ago in the match against Saracens when Munster were pretty much outclassed all over the pitch. Hasn't played a huge amount of rugby over the intervening couple of years. His career has just been dogged by injuries. With Joey Carberry out, the Bleyendaal-Murray access, what do you make of that?
I think Conor Murray obviously has got back. If we're looking at one game for form, he played very well in that quarter final. He was the one that created, certainly the second Keith Earls try with his break off the ruck and sucking defenders in. That's what we know and love with Conor Murray. I think there'll be huge comfort with Bleyendaal. He's, you have to remember before Joey Carberry, they had a full season together, and I don't think with Bleyendaal you get a different sort of 10, a guy that controls the game, less X factor. You look at.
So is he actually potentially better suited for a game like this?
Yeah, maybe so. Listen, Joey Carberry's a class player, and he's the ability to beat someone one-on-one for fun. So it's just, and there was always question marks. Could he shape the rest of his game into being that controlling figure? I think you've got that in Tyler Bleyendaal, but you don't have that X factor individual performance. So if I was defending him, would you be thinking about allowing him to run a little bit more and mark some of the more dangerous players? That's definitely something that I would imagine that Saracens will have mentioned this week. But he's big goal kick from the touchline after the Keith Earls try in the quarter final. He nudges the ball forward, Munster style, making sure the forwards are playing in the right areas. And I just think his game control is a little bit better than Joey's is at a young age. So I don't think they're going to lose a huge amount, albeit it's going to be slightly different.
Our rugby coverage brought to you with thanks to Vodafone, team of us, everyone in. Let's chat Leinster then. It feels like Leinster got out of jail a bit against Ulster, but you look at the potential starting team for the game against Toulouse on Sunday, and it's just a world away from the team that started against Ulster. And you mentioned what Tyler Bleyendaal did with that kick from the touchline, like what Ross Byrne did with his match-winning kick. Probably not enough, I'd imagine, to keep his place. Like if Sexton is anyways fit, you start him.
Yeah, he does, and Johnny's obviously been struggling with this injury. The talk is that he's trained the first couple of days of the week, and that all's going well. He hasn't played a huge amount of rugby for Leinster, so Ross has gotten a lot of game time and stood up for the big moments. He scored a try in that game, and then obviously the game-winning penalty. I think Leinster will be very, very. We're very fortunate to find their way through. We haven't, covered it for a while, but that obviously the Jacob Stockdale incident was the difference for me in the winning and losing of the game. The momentum swings with Ulster. If that scored, I think the mentality changes and confidence grows.
Yeah. Because obviously we look back in hindsight and go, well, that's Leinster, that's that muscle memory. They know how to get the job done in these big days. Jacob Stockdale touches that down. It's probably out of their hands.
Yeah, it is. Well, Leinster can still go up and get a score, but it's just the manner in which the game swung within 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It's obviously losing out on potentially a 2-score lead, and then all of a sudden concede the lead to a try up the other end after the Jack Conan break. So definitely when you get to quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals, the margins narrow down to smaller and smaller amounts, and it would have been difficult viewing for the likes of Jacob Stockdale, but it would be difficult viewing for Leinster as well, in that they got they get outplayed for large parts of that game. So they'll feel that they've used up their get out of jail card and that they won't get a second bite with a Toulouse team. I went over and saw their semi-final in the La Défense arena, and they were sublime. So Toulouse are well and truly back.
The performance levels then against Ulster, do you put that down to just an off day, or simply that Leinster can't get to the level they want if they don't have Toner, Sexton, Henshaw on the pitch?
You know, the best teams are Barcelona ever as good without Messi? No, they're not. So
which one of them is Messi?
But even the amalgamation of the three of them, combines something that the great players, in football or any sport bring, and the comfort that seeing a Dev Toner, seeing a Robbie Henshaw, seeing a Johnny Sexton in the team sheet. For all the other players, the comfort that brings, it's an intangible, where immediately confidence is higher. I looked at that Leinster team in the quarterfinal, and I saw a vulnerability for the first time. They're playing Sean O'Brien at 7, but ordinarily, if Josh van der Fleer and Dan Levy were fit, would he be getting in the team? Possibly not. So it's mad that we're talking about, a Sean O'Brien who 2 years ago was absolutely brilliant in the Lions.
He's got to take one of these chances.
Because opportunities have been taken away from others through injury. So, I think Leinster will feel as though they've managed to navigate their way through. They know they don't have a second chance in a semi-final, and they'll need all those big players to fire this weekend. And
it obviously provides a few selection headaches as well. And the return to try scoring form, at least, of Rob Kearney last weekend was a pretty remarkable statistics. Was it 53 games without scoring?
31 months. 31 months.
Wow. Does that get him back in ahead of Jordan Larmour?
I don't know. I think is his inclusion or exclusion to do with minutes on the training ground as well, possibly.
Well, are Toulouse the type of team you want the steady hand of Kearney, or you want the explosiveness of Larmour?
I would imagine that they'd prefer to see Rob Kearney at fullback, because they're not going to kick the ball up in the air and send a load of Indians after it. They're going to be playing the game that they've been playing, where they're happy to break from their own line. They're the Toulouse of old. They're young guys. They're not afraid to play literally heads up rugby, and I think it was. It was best described or best seen in the semi-final, or the quarter-final, I should say, against Racing, where they were under the pump, 5 metre scrum, a man down, they turned it over, and nearly any other side would think, let's get this off the pitch and take a breather. They saw opportunity, and I think, that said, the type of game, they're not going to change that type of game. They're not all of a sudden going to start nudging the corners. So, who would you prefer to have at full back? The steady guy, the controlling guy, or a guy that could rip you apart in counter-attack? And so it'll be really interesting to see what Leinster decide to go with. You've sometimes picked players on confidence as well, and you can be sure that Rob Kearney's a lot more confident, having scored 2 tries at the weekend, and likewise Dave Kearney, albeit in a loss. But I'm intrigued as to see what Stuart Lancaster and Leo Cullen go with.
And what about the 3 overseas players? Again, European semi-final, this debate comes up. If it's Scott Fardy, Jameson Gibson-Park, James Lowe, who's the unlucky one?
Unfortunately for James Lowe, I think it's him again. I think, you would have anticipated that with Devon Toner back, Scott Fardy, won't start, but with Mick Carney and Ross Maloney out injured for the remainder of the season, I think you have to have a backup second row on the bench, which seems strange, having your 2 overseas players potentially starting on the bench. You look at the quality of the wingers, and Adam Byrne, was very good in attack. Still a couple of question marks in defence, but brilliant in the air. Dave Kearney back with some good form. Fergus McFadden back with fitness. Jordan Larmour, Rob Kearney. So you look at that quality versus your alternative second row option coming in. I don't
with
even
Devon
know
Toner with Devon Toner just coming back from injury as well.
Even though Devon Toner and James Ryan are 80-minute players, I don't think you can run that risk. So for me, I think it's going to be James Lowe is the unlucky one to miss out.
He seems a particularly upbeat kind of guy, James Lowe, but you'd wonder what it does for his morale that he seems to miss out on an awful lot of these big games.
He can't get Irish qualified quick enough, you know. It's like to miss out on a Champions Cup final last year, and now watching from the sidelines must be painful, knowing that you're the number one winger when you're playing from a full deck. So it's a difficult time for them.
You can send us in your thoughts on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and text. The best one will be named our Heineken Star comment of the week and win a signed rugby ball. Just to wrap up then, Toulouse had this insane 47-44 win over Clermont at the weekend. It seems as though going into the Final Four, we kind of know exactly what Leinster, Munster, Saracens will give us. Do you know exactly what Toulouse are going to do on Sunday?
I think you have a fair idea. I think they're playing with this new freedom under Ugo Mola, where they're encouraged to throw the offload. They're not trying to create rucks. They don't want to be a rucking team. Their stats on offloads absolutely smash everyone else out of the category.
Give Joe Schmidt nightmares.
but what you want as a good defensive team, you want rucks to be able to set your defensive line. You don't want the point of contact constantly changed, because then you can't defend with the person to your right and the person to your left, because you don't actually know who they're going to be. And I think the excitement and the X factor that they have, but they've got some thuggery up front as well. You know, Joe Tokori, very, very lucky after the weekend. You know, he's going to be. He's got a hearing next week after a really high shot that looked pretty brutal. A bit coincidental that his hearing was put off for a week of a European semi-final. But then you look at Jerome Kano, Charlie Faumuina, two really good All Blacks, probably could still have been plying their trade back in New Zealand, when they decided to move over. So you look at that muscle along with Cheslin Colby, Gaitan in the centre, who's scored 7 or 8 tries in as many games recently. So they've got players really high on confidence. And I think we're going to see a very different Toulouse than the one that came to the RDS in January.
And can they manage a game?
Yeah, I think the sense is that they're going to play Dupont at 10. He's obviously been fantastic for France in a disappointing French team in the Six Nations, and then when Zach Holmes got sent off in the quarter-final and Bézi came in to 9, he controlled the game brilliantly. He's not going to kick the ball a lot, but I don't think his outside backs want him to kick it. They're comfortable with ball in hand. You can see the quality of their passing is exceptionally good. They have high confidence. They want to get it to their X factor, so why would you kick the ball away? So the way to beat them is to smother them, is to not give them any possession, be miserly. And Leinster are very good at doing that. They can sometimes be perceived as a team that overplays in their own 22 or in their own territory. But I think it's something that they probably have to do, not to give opportunity to that exciting
So considering how comfortable they are with ball in hand at the back line, if you're selecting that Leinster team and you're looking at your wingers, are you looking at the players with defensive qualities first? Like, you think back to the semi-final, the way Jacob Stockdale ripped through Adam Byrne, like, does that go against him in a game like this?
I think it might do. I think you balance it up. If you're going to play Rob Kearney at fullback, I think you put one very good defender in Dave Kearney on one wing, and you put some X factor in Jordan Larmour on the other, and then if you decide to stick with what's gone in the quarter final and it worked well for you, Adam Byrne gets another opportunity, but there's always going to be the occasional concern about his defence, because it is the weakest part of his game. But by God, he's good going forward. So I don't know. It depends on what way your psyche is. I feel with Stuart Lancaster in particular that he thinks all out attack first and defence second. A bit like, we're going to score more than you are, so try and contain our best players. So
47-44 on Sunday at the Aviva is what you're saying?
I think it could be a high scoring game, because both teams want to play. Although, that said, you look at the defensive system that Toulouse have in play, the best defence in the I think it's the best defence in the top 14, or the second best defence in the Champions Cup. Only concede an average of under 2 tries a game, which is very good, and particularly on the road. Leinster are great at scoring tries, so it'll be a real contrast of attack versus defence there.
All right, we'll have full live commentary of Munster against Saracens live from the Ricoh Arena on Saturday afternoon. Johnny Murphy and Matthew Tate will be alongside Conor Morris for that. And then Andy Dunn and Maura Tracy-Nicalig will be at the Aviva on Sunday for Leinster against Toulouse. So you won't miss a thing from the Heineken Champions Cup this weekend. Give us your 2 predictions.
I'm going to go with the two home country victories, but I think the Sarries Munster game is going to be very, very tight, and I think both games will be tight. I think we'll have 2 really brilliant spectacles. So I'm going to go with Sarries and Leinster.
All right, good stuff, Brian. Enjoy the weekend.
Cheers.
Brian O'Driscoll on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.